Thank you for everyone's presence today. Today we're gonna have a little history class here. We're gonna continue on the introduction of the gospel according to Spiritism. The introduction before we start learning all the lessons from the spirits. We're gonna just get into a little bit deeper today on some of the historical events and the meaning of some of the words that were used by Jesus, and they're used on the gospel. So, okay. So to understand the gospel, literally, it is necessary to know the connotation of many words in the context of the Jewish community at that time. So we can get a little bit more familiar with some of the connotations, some of the words, some of the contexts, how do they live, and things like that. And also the significance explains the real spirit of many of Jesus' parables. But of course, it is very different for us. We wouldn't expect anywhere else to be easy for us to understand, but just the fact that we do a little bit study of this history, it helps understand a little bit more the meaning, especially, and how do they live back then. So the fundamentals institution of the Judaism. So that's what we're going to go over today. Some of the institutions that were created by the Judaism. So the temple was the place of religious worship and the only official venue for sacrifice. The synagogue, the buildings where the Jews used to gather to offer public prayers under the leadership of the elders, the scribes, or the doctors of the law. So regarding the synagogue and the temple, I got something from the gospel that I wanted to read here that just completes a little bit what was explained on the figures here. So it says every year all the Jews would go in there at the synagogue in pilgrimage for the principal festivals such as the Passover, the dedication, and the Feast of the Tabernacle. It was on the occasion of these feasts that Jesus would also be present. The other cities, so we're talking about Jerusalem, the other cities did not have temples, only synagogues, buildings where the Jewish people would collect for their Saturday meetings and public prayers under the leadership of their elders, the scribes or scholars versed in the law. It was due to this fact that Jesus, although he was not a priest, he was able to teach at the synagogues on Saturdays, because it was not just for the priests. It was for anyone that would that wanted to teach or wanted to give a little prayer on this in this case, just to talk about it. So anyone could go. They didn't have to be a priest. So that's why Jesus was able to go there on Saturdays. Then the scribes and the Pharisees, religion was for them a means to reach their goals and not a profession of sincere faith. And we're trying to go, so we're going all the way back in time. So the scribes and Pharisees were the oldest kind that we're talking about here. They used to conceal dissolute behavior, arrogance, and hunger for dominations. So regarding the Pharisees, they took an active part in religion's controversy, definitely. They were faithful practitioners of exterior cults and ceremony, full of ardent zeal, enemies of innovations, maintaining great severity of principles. But behind the cover of punctilious devotion lay dissolute habits, a great deal of pride, and above all, an excessive desire to dominate. Religion was actually a means to an end rather than an objective of sincere faith. It possessed nothing of virtue beyond outward appearances and ostentations. Nevertheless, they exercised a great influence over the people, in whose eyes they were sacred. This is how they became powerful in Jerusalem. They believed, or made out they believed, in divine providence, the immortality of the soul, eternal punishment, and the resurrection of the dead. But Jesus, esteeming simplicity and the qualities of the heart above all else, whose preference within the law was for the spirit which vitalizes to the word which kills, applied himself through his mission to the masking of their hypocrisy, and because of this was considered by them to be their enemy. This then is the reason why the Pharisees, together with the high priest, incited the people to eliminate him. So it's almost, Jesus was almost like a threat for the Pharisees, and responsible for the celebrations of external practice and ceremonies of the cult. So very powerful, as I think the figure here is showing, you know, a lot of very well dressed for back then, and definitely trying to show that their right is the only right. It was definitely not the religion was definitely not an object of sincere faith for them, and it was all about ostentation and appearances. Masters who taught the Moses law and interpreted it for the people. Let's not forget that we're talking about very uneducated people back then. So the fact that the Pharisees took the law and interpreted for them, again, very powerful and very dangerous, right? They form sects that share the same principles. And the Sadducees, and I'm sorry about my English if I'm not saying those words correctly. I wish there was any of our American friends here that could help me with the pronunciation. But the Sadducees, Jewish sect, formed around 248 BC. They didn't believe in the immortality of the soul, the resurrection, or good and evil angels. They believed in God, but they were materialists. However, what they did believe in God, but as they expected nothing after death, they served him, having in mind only temporary recompenses, which, according to them, were limited by divine providence. So definitely did not believe on life after death. They did not believe everything was done in this life, and it was basically the end. The end was when you died in this life. With these thoughts in mind, their main objective in life was the satisfaction of all physical senses. So it was this life, not thinking about an after, not thinking about an afterlife. The satisfaction of the sense was, in their view, the essential objective of life. And then the Essenes. I told you guys it was going to be a history class. The Jewish sect formed around 150 BC. They lived in a type of monastery and formed amongst themselves a sort of moral and religious association. They were distinguished by their pacifist customs and austere virtues. They taught the love of God and one's neighbor, the immortality of the soul, and they believed in resurrection. So we can see as the time goes by, they kind of, the beliefs are a little bit more, they changed a little bit. Now on the scenes, they believed in the resurrection, they believe in the immortality. So contrary to the Sadducees, who were very sensual and denied immortality, and the Pharisees of rigid external practice and only apparent virtues, the Essenes never took part in the disputes which caused antagonism between the two other sects. So they came to change these beliefs. In their way of life, they were similar to the first Christians, and the moral principles they profess caused many people to suppose that Jesus had belonged to their community before he began his mission. It is certain that he knew them, but there is nothing to prove that he was related to them. So all that has been written to this effect is simply hypothetical, which it kind of makes a little bit sense that Jesus would definitely be a part of knew their beliefs, because that's when things started to change a little bit on the beliefs. They lived in celibacy, condemned slavery and war, devoted themselves to agriculture. Their genre of life approached that of the first Christians. And the Nazarites, Jews who took vows under ancient law to keep themselves perfectly pure. They were committed to chastity, abstinence from alcohol, and the preservation of the hair. This was also the name of a heretical sect of the first centuries of the Christian era. And then we have the Publicans. We know the story about Zacchaeus and Jesus. They were tax collectors. He was a tax collector. And I think there's going to be a lesson on this, the gospel. I'm pretty sure that is going to go a little bit more into this, the story of Zacchaeus and Jesus. So the publicans, those who were in charge of collecting taxes and income of every sort. They were considered people of low life for their misdeeds and the wealth they obtained unlawfully. Taxation was what the Jews found hardest to accept, giving rise to several revolts. And then we have the Samaritans. Samaria was the capital of the kingdom of Israel. They accepted only the Pentateuch, which contained the law of Moses. In the eyes of the Orthodox Jews, they were heretics and were despised and persecuted. And what I found to be interesting is that the gospel has that some Samaritans are still to be found in certain regions of the Levant, especially near Nablus and in Jaffa. They observe the law of Moses more strictly than other Jews and only marry among themselves. And we have the therapeutes, the servants of God or healers, the Jewish sectarians and contemporaries of Christ. They had great relations with the Essenes whose principles they professed. So remember, the Essenes was when they started to believe on the resurrection, the reincarnation and the immortality of the soul. So the therapeutes had a very good relation with the Essenes. And the gospel has, on the therapeutes said they were extremely frugal in their eating habits. They were celibate, dedicated to meditation, lived solitary lives, and constituted a truly religious order. Philon, a Platonic Jewish philosopher from Alexandria, was the first to speak out of the therapeutes, whom he considered as a Jewish sect. Eusebius, Saint Jerome, and other originators of the church believed them to be Christians. Whether they were or whether they were Jewish, the fact remains that, like the Essenes, they represent a link in the union between the Jewish and the Christian faith. So I see the therapeutes almost like healers, working with energy, and the fact that they had a very great eating habits, I would imagine as well, working a lot with plants and doing the healing through eating habits as well. They formed a link of union between Judaism and Christianity. The toll chargers, I think they kind of fit into the tax collectors that we talked about before. So the lower class, but they were the lower class tax collectors. responsible for charging fees at the entrance of the cities. Their job corresponds to that of customs officers today. They suffer the same prejudice as publicans. So I would imagine that people didn't have the free will to go in and out of the cities with any kind of food or anything that they would acquire outside of the cities. They would have to pay the toll chargers a fee to go back into their cities with their food or whatever they acquire outside of the cities. So this is it for today. I think it's kind of hard in 20 minutes for us to study deep on the history of the Jews. This is just for us, again, to have just an idea when Jesus is talking about in the gospel, when he's talking about the parables, for us to kind of have an idea that the Pharisees came, and then the Sadducees, the Saints, the Samaritans, the therapeutes. So how the Jewish and how the Christian beliefs were progressing through time. But definitely, again, it's just for us to have kind of an idea before we start studying the gospel. But if you guys want to get a little bit more deep into it, you can definitely read the gospel, but that look for resources outside as well, because very interesting and very important for us to kind of know a little bit of this history, so we can understand Jesus' teachings and the parables and all the words and phrases that was used back then. So that's it for today. I'm gonna go ahead and do our final prayer.
Are you done?
Would you like to add anything? I didn't know if you were there. So Ellen, you are on mute. Would you like to add anything?
No, now I unmute.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Have
No.
you had the chance to read this part of the gospel, the introduction?
Oh yeah. So I think that this part of the gospel according to the Spiritism is very important, because most of us, when we try to interpret, the interpretation of the Bible requires knowledge on history.
Yes.
And if you don't have this knowledge, we get kind of lost, because the Bible, is written no more, but almost 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, so much has changed in this part of the world where Jesus passed and taught and lived his life. And to understand who are the Jews, it's really important, because Jesus was Jewish too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some people got when the religions became actually more popular, and they some people start being Christians and building churches and all those kind of things, and so many problems start happening in this place, and problems that we still see, but they were the same people. Jewish are the same people as Christians, as Muslim, those people that lives in this area of the globe, they are the same people in the same geographic area. And sometimes people get confused, think they are different, but they're not. They just decide to have different beliefs. And then when everything started, the problem started. But anyway, so it's really important to understand who was the Jewish. And when the gospel in the beginning, according to the Spiritism, of course, explain who are those groups, they are talking about in general.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really important to understand as well. You're not saying, oh, they were like talking bad things about Jewish. No, they were talking about in general. And back then, more than 2,000 years ago, that's the way that religion worked. So many things has changed since then. And one important thing, the belief of reincarnation, spirituality, and all those kind of things came from them, from the Hebrews. So they knew already. That's why it was in the Bible, Torah, right? That is the name that they call the Bible. The Old Testament, it has all this information. And then, not the church, the church, kind of the church, just decide to take it off. But anyway, so it's really important, because if you don't know the history behind, you're not going to be able to understand.
Definitely, yeah. And like I said, this is just, as you said, is a general, not all the Pharisees were like this, not all the Samaritans, it's a general, definitely. If you want to deep into it, you definitely need to look for history.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and especially because it's a time that the behavior and the culture was all around business and power, like all that area of the globe by the time was around this, because it was the Jewish, the Hebrews versus the Roman, and those are the two powerful people by them. Actually, Roma is much more, but they have their business, their deals. But if you're thinking about the people in general, the population in general, there are like so many different people, and that's why some Jewish.
You can't generalize, definitely.
Yeah, you can generalize, but that's why some Jewish start like looking Jesus in a different way, and most of them, they were like the poor people, the one that was starving, slaveries, and the women's, that was like another important thing to look at, because they start like seeing that it's something wrong, because what this guy saying is we are equal. And that's really important to understand. Back then, we still think like this, unfortunately, but much less. But
Yeah.
back then,
equality was not an option,
equality,
because the power,
yes.
the power of the Pharisees, the Jews, or the government, it was not, equality was not an option.
Yeah, equality, that was the word I was trying to say. Yes, equality is not even an option. It was something that it doesn't make sense for them back then. Like when they came to ask Jesus, so am I the same as my slave? How? It's impossible, because they couldn't see much further. They couldn't see beyond the material things. And then since then, you have been learning that everybody's equal. And that's why there are so many Jewish that like see like this already. And even they don't, it doesn't mean they don't believe in Jesus, okay? Because they know Jesus was a person. They just don't follow the teachings, but some Jewish does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the Jewish, because they are from, they're Hebrews, is like a religion right now. And we have so much to learn from them, because, they are the old world.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
A lot of history. Yeah.
It's a lot of history behind them. That's really interesting. But yeah, I think that's it. You said pretty good. And it's nice to remember.
Do a little review, right? Yeah.
Right. Little review, and just like to understand where you at right now. And in this way, we're going to be able to understand much more in the Bible, especially.
Yeah, the next class is gonna be the end of the introduction. I think we're gonna talk about Socrates and Plato, and then we're gonna start the gospel
Yep.
chapter. We're gonna
All
start
right.
with,
I think that's it.
okay. Let me go
Thanks,
ahead and
Samantha.
here. Screen went black. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So let's go ahead and close our eyes one more time. Let's take this time to do a big breath. That there are spiritual friends that are with us, are able to help us with the exchange of energy, to blow out all the bad energy, all the sickness, all the tiredness that is inside of us, and bring us energized energies, energized feelings, fewer cells, fewer bodies with good oxygen, that this help us one more time to go through our week, to resolve all the problems that we have, all the issues, to accept and understand the trials, the expirations that are in our path. We ask for patience, we ask for love, we ask for us always be able to put ourselves in our brothers and sisters' shoes, understand, don't judge, and again, fill our heart with love so we can spread that. The love that is starts from our heart, goes to our brain, and we can dissipate their love through our eyes, through our mouths, through our words, to everyone around us. Thank you one more time for this Tuesday, and I see you guys next week. Amen.
Thank you, Samantha. See you next week.
Thank you, honey. Take care.
Tuesday. Thank you. Bye.